Alright guys, in this video we are going to walk through the installation process of our Can-Am Maverick X3-STAGE5 kit. Now in this kit we include our PMX dash kit with necessary mounting hardware and wiring harnesses, our PMX2 digital marine receiver, our upper speaker panels which accept our PM2652 marine grade speakers, our 4-gauge complete wiring harness including the amplifier mounting plate, as well as our TM1000X5AD 5-channel amplifier, an underseat subwoofer enclosure for both the driver and passenger side, and 2 of our RM Series Prime 10-inch marine subwoofers. Lastly, we add our rear option with our PM2652W-MB rear speaker cans, along with the clamp assembly and wire harnesses to connect them. Now, to get started with the installation of this kit, the first thing we need to do is remove the upper dash cover that covers the fuse holder. Alright, so now that we have the panel removed, we're ready to go ahead and locate the 2 holes that we need to drill to secure the dash assembly at the front of the dash itself. This is going to be where we screw in the 2 provided threaded screws that come with the kit. Now, in most of the Can-Am X3 models, you'll see 2 small indentions molded into the dash. This locates where we want to go ahead and drill the holes using an 1/8" drill bit. In case your vehicle does not have these indentions, you can use the dash kit itself as a guide by laying it in place and simply marking through the 2 bolt holes. Once they're marked, go ahead and drill through. Now that we have the holes drilled, we're ready to go ahead and start the assembly of the dash kit itself. To do this, we'll need to locate the dash kit, our PMX2 carrier tray, and of course our PMX2 radio. To start the assembly process, you're going to take the carrier tray provided in the kit, and you're going to mount this into the dash kit assembly itself. Alright, with the carrier tray installed, we're ready to go ahead and install our PMX2 radio. To do this, using the 4 remaining screws that came with the dash kit, simply insert the PMX2 radio from the back side and install the 4 screws. Alright, so now that we have the PMX2 installed in the dash kit, we're ready to move back over to the vehicle to install the main power harness. Now to install the harness, we are going to take the 2-pin black connector with the power and ground wire. We're going to drop that down through the hole by the fuse block into the lower dash area. Now this connector will plug into a mating 2-pin connector that you'll find underneath the dash. Alright guys, so now that we have the power connection made with the PMX radio harness, we're ready to move on to disassemble the upper dash to get it ready to install our new speaker mounting panels. Now to do this, we're going to remove the upper panels located on both the driver and passenger side of the vehicle by removing the appropriate bolts and securing pins. Now we want to make sure we also disconnect any switches located on the driver's side panel, and then we're going to relocate those to the new panel when we're ready to install it. Okay guys, so some things to note when you're disassembling the upper dash panels to prep for your speaker panels. What you'll find is behind the gas cap cover, there will be a 10mm nut that attaches one of the primary bolts. You'll need to remove the bolt and nut assembly to be able to get the passenger side dash panel out. Additionally, on the driver's side, you may want to remove the two T27 bolts that hold the center upper dash assembly in place. This will loosen it up, giving you some slack to be able to pull the panel out from underneath because of the flange that's molded into the side of it. Additionally, be aware that there is also a panel pin mounted underneath the dash that's not easily visible from above. Once we have the panels out, you'll want to move your switches from the driver's side factory panel over to your new speaker panel. And you'll also notice that there's two retaining clips on each panel where the factory pin clips go into. You will need to remove these and move them over to the new panels so when you place the pin clips back in, they have something to lock into. Alright guys, now that we have that done, we're ready to continue the disassembly process. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the passenger front and rear seat out of the vehicle. This will give us access to the transmission tunnel where we're going to run our wiring. Now, one thing to note, the nuts that hold the seats in place as well as the seat belt receivers are torqued on. So you will most likely need a strong breaker bar or even an impact gun to get these off your vehicle. Just be ready. Alright, so now that we have the seats out, we've gained access to the transmission tunnel. Next thing we need to do is remove the cover panels along the side of the tunnel. This is going to allow us a space to be able to run our wiring through. Alright, so now that we have the passenger side disassembled, we're ready to move over to the driver's side. Next thing is to remove the driver's seat out of the vehicle, and this is going to give us room to mount our subwoofer enclosure. Now the driver's seat does also have a seat belt sensor plugged into it, so you'll need to make sure that before you just pull it out of the vehicle that you unplug the sensor cable. All right guys, so now that we have the disassembly process done, we can get ready to install our primary power harness. Now we're going to route this from the battery location forward through the transmission tunnel up into the dash area where we're going to mount the amplifier. Now the harness itself comes obviously with our power wire that we're going to route, but it also comes with our input and output harness connected via the remote turn-on wire at the power connector that plugs into the amplifier. Now to make it a little bit easier to route, we're going to go ahead and disconnect the remote turn-on wire out of the power connector temporarily until after we get the wire up into the dash, at which point we'll go ahead and reconnect it. All right guys, so now that we have the power wire installed in the vehicle, we're ready to move on to do the prep work for installing our rear speaker enclosures. Now in the box, you will find the T-shaped mounting yoke. This is going to allow the speakers to mount and secure to the clamp assembly. You need to locate that as well as the lower section of your clamp assembly. To assemble these two together, we need to remove the insert. And we're going to take our speaker wire, passing the 2-pin Molex connector through the top of the yoke, allowing enough to stick through, put the two together, and then using the mounting hardware, place the nut on the inside, and pass the mounting bolt through the bottom, securing the two together. Now with the kit also comes a safety lanyard. This is designed to connect between the clamp assembly and the speaker can itself, and is there to prevent the can from falling off in the event the securing screw backs out and the can comes off the mounting yoke. All right guys, so now that we have the clamps pre-assembled, we're ready to go ahead and install our cans and clamp assemblies onto the vehicle and route the wire. One thing to note before you just go and mount them though, on the end of one of the 2-pin connectors, you'll notice there is a red dot. This signifies that this is the rear right speaker cable. Make sure that you install the appropriate cable on the right side of the vehicle. Otherwise, you may run short on cable length once you get to the dash area and realize that you have to pull it back out and reinstall it. All right, now that we're in the rear of the vehicle, a couple things to mention to you. Depending on the model of Can-Am X3 you have, yours may come with shock reservoirs mounted to the roll cage, like ours did. Now, originally these shock reservoirs were mounted vertically and higher up on the roll bar. To give clearance for our rear can assemblies, we've loosened the clamps, rotated them inboard, and then slid them down to give us enough clearance at the upper part of the roll cage to mount our clamp assemblies. Now the clamp assemblies are designed to be able to mount inside or outside, depending on your preference. We choose to mount them on the inside to provide the cans more protection, obviously inside the roll cage while you're running around. The inner saddle assembly with the cable will mount on the inside of the roll bar. We'll put the saddle itself on the outside, tightening them down evenly on both sides so we don't overpressurize one side, potentially splitting that saddle. Once it's in place, we'll route the cables up forward on the roll cage and down through the opening, as opposed to back and down underneath the rear fender. This is to ensure, because this is a four-seater, that we have enough cable length once we get to the dash area to be able to plug in our cables. Once we get through the fender assembly, we'll follow the cabling down along the rear firewall and then pass the connectors in through the transmission tunnel opening. All right guys, so now that we have the clamp assemblies and cables installed in the vehicle, we can go ahead and install our cans themselves. Now to install the cans, you're going to need to remove the security torque screw on the back side of the collar. This will allow us to pass it through the security lanyard that we installed in the clamp assembly and then reinstall it back into the collar. To connect the can to the cable assembly, simply align the 2-pin harness, slide it in until it locks, and then you're able to slide the can assembly over the clamp collar, securing it in place with a security torque screw. All right, so now that we have our rear speaker wires into the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and route them forward through the transmission tunnel, following the primary wire harness up into the dash area on the driver's side. All right guys, so with the rear cans installed and the wires ran to the dash, the next thing we're ready to do is install our sub enclosures. Now this kit comes with 2 enclosures, one that mounts under the driver's side, one that mounts under the passenger side front seats. Now the way these are designed to go in, they're mounting with the Rockford Fosgate logo to the front of the vehicle. The driver's side will have the metal mounting tab to the left, passenger to the right. They're designed to slide underneath the roll cage bar assembly, which will seat in this curved section at the front. Now when you're sliding these in, it is a tight fit, so you will have to use some force to get them underneath the bar. Some cases it may be a little harder than others because of how the seat bracket is welded to that bar, depending on their tolerances. Once the enclosure is in place, you'll notice on the seat bracket there are 2 holes that align with the brass inserts at the front of the enclosure. That's where you'll utilize the 2 short screws to mount them to the seat bracket. The 2 longer screws with the tapered tip, which are thread cutting screws, will be used to mount the metal bracket into 2 pre-drilled holes in the side frame assembly. All right, now with the subwoofer enclosures in place, we can go ahead and do the last step for mounting. In each of the subwoofer kits, you'll find 4 bolts and 4 nuts. Located in the bottom of the subwoofer enclosure, you'll find 4 holes that we need to drill through the floor pan of the vehicle, run the bolt from underneath the vehicle into the enclosure, and secure it in place with the nut. Now to do this, we're going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit, drilling through the holes in the enclosure right through the floor of the vehicle. Once we have those secure, we'll then connect and route our subwoofer enclosure cable. The connector is located on the transmission tunnel side of the enclosure and simply plugs in, at which point we'll route these cables up through the transmission tunnel and into the dash area where we're going to eventually mount the amplifier. Included with your Stage 5 power kit, you will find a subwoofer cable Y adapter. This replaces the existing subwoofer plug and allows you to plug both subwoofer enclosures into the same output. All right guys, so now that we have the enclosures securely in place and the cabling ran, we're ready to go ahead and install the subwoofers. Now this kit comes with 2 over 10-inch prime marine subs, which are dual voice coil models. Now the way that we need to wire these voice coils together is in series, and to do so, we are going to connect a red or positive terminal on one side to a black or negative terminal on the opposite side using the jumper wire that comes with the enclosure. Once we have those connected, we can take them over to the enclosure, connect the remaining 2 terminals to the cable found inside the enclosure, and screw them in place. Now with this install, we will not be using the included grills that come with the subwoofer. All right guys, with the subwoofers mounted in the enclosures, we're ready to move on to the installation of our amplifier mounting bracket. Now the bracket secures on the driver's side in a vertical fashion alongside the outer trim panel. The angle mounts to the front or along the firewall, with this slot aligning with one of the threaded bolts that protrude through. The clamps will clamp it to the side roll cage, and we'll be utilizing the 2 outermost sets of holes to mount our 5-channel amplifier. The bracket has to go in first, and then we'll set up and install the amplifier. All right guys, with the bracket in place, we're ready to go ahead and do some pre-setup on the amplifier to make it a little easier on us when it comes to the final tuning. Now, to set up the amplifier, the first thing that you're going to want to do is position the input selector switch located on the end panel into the 2-channel position. This will take the front input and drive it to both the front and rear speaker outputs of the amplifier. On the top control panel, working our way across, we're going to set the frequency selector switch for our crossovers for the front channels and the rear channels, both to high pass position. The crossover frequency dials for front and rear channels, we will adjust to approximately 80 Hertz, as well as the rear subwoofer channel, also to 80 Hertz. The punch EQ controls we will leave in the full counterclockwise or down position, and the input level adjustments we will leave at their approximate 12 o'clock position until we get to the final tuning. Now, also found on this amplifier are two additional switches. The infrasonic filter is an additional crossover filter, and since these subwoofers are in sealed enclosures, it will not hurt to go ahead and turn it to the on position. And lastly is the sub input switch. This also needs to be switched to the on position since we will be using the subwoofer output of the PMX radio. Once it's set up, we're able to go ahead, take it to the vehicle, and install it with the supplied hardware. Now, one thing you may have noticed is it was a little tricky getting the amplifier into position and secured to the bracket. In this particular vehicle, there was a production change with the position of the power steering motor. That's why we were unable to install the amplifier to the bracket prior to installing it into the vehicle. If you look in your vehicle and find that the power steering motor is in a different position, you may be able to still install the bracket and amplifier together as a single unit. It's purely dependent on which model and year Can-Am X3 that you have. Alright guys, now that we have the amplifier installed onto the bracket, we can go ahead and make our cable connections for power, ground, and audio input and output. On the forward side by the firewall, we'll connect the power connector, as well as the subwoofer and front speaker output. On the driver's side on the amplifier, we'll connect our front and rear inputs that will be fed from our PMX radio. Alright guys, so now that we've made the connections at the amplifier, we're ready to go ahead and route our left and right front speaker cable. Once we've routed those, we can go ahead and connect those to the amplifier output harness, and at the same time we'll go ahead and connect our rear speaker cables that we ran earlier. Once that's done, we can connect our remote turn-on wire from the amp harness to the PMX radio harness, as well as route our input RCA cables into the same area where the power harness for our PMX radio is located. When we get that done, we'll go ahead and zip tie our wiring up and prepare for our speaker panel installation. All right, with the output speaker connections made and our wires neatened up with some zip ties, we're ready to go ahead and install our upper dash panels. Now these are going to accept our 6.5-inch punch marine speakers. And we're going to go ahead and install the panels first, but we're not going to secure them down. We're simply going to get them in place. Once they're there, we'll go ahead and connect our speakers and get our speakers into position, again, not securing them in place. We won't put any hardware in place until after we've done our first test of the system. That way, in the event we need to disconnect and go into our wiring to check anything, we don't have to disassemble half the car to get to it. All right, with the speakers connected and set in place, the next thing we need to do is go ahead and connect our PMX radio to the power and output harness. Simply connect the 12-pin multi-pin connector to the radio and then connect the RCAs to the front and rear outputs. And we'll set it in place. Again, not securing it until after we've tested the system. Once that's done, we can go back to the battery, make our power and ground connection with the main power harness, at which point we'll be ready to power it up and do a cursory test on the system to make sure it's working. All right guys, with the battery connected and the system tested, we're ready to go ahead and reassemble the vehicle, get it ready to get it back out on the road. All right guys, now that we have the vehicle reassembled, we're ready to test the system one last time and make any final adjustments to the amplifier we feel we need. After that, we're pretty much ready to get it back on the road. All right guys, that pretty much wraps it up for this install. As you can see, it's pretty easy and straightforward to do with a little work on your part. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to give our tech support guys a call or check out our website for more information. Appreciate you watching this video, and we'll see you again in the next one.